Welcome back to Sherlock Holmes with the Rudeman. In the last episode, we had to come to this infirmary to get some medicine for a guy that's got a terrible cough, and he's only got about a month to live. And so we need to head back to Dr. Watson. I can't remember where we found the guy, but let's go check the dead end. There's Dr. Watson over there, so that's where we need to go.
Find the medicine, Holmes. We must make haste.
Yeah, I've got the medicine. I gotta figure out how to give it to him. Let's see. Documents, notes, items, medicine. Okay, we've got the medicine.
Here is the medication, Watson. Is our man movable?
He should be able to stand in a few minutes and will no longer be suffering from his cough before long.
Consider the affair resolved. Accompany him to his niece's while I return to the boarding house, and then join me at the police station. Let's return to the boarding house.
Okay. There we go.
I have good news for you, Mr. Finley. We have sent a captain to stay with a relative, and he shouldn't bother you for a while.
I also have some good news. I have your police bag.
Thank you. I bid you good day.
Oh, it was nothing. Tell me, one of my wife's friends lost...
Another day, Finley. Another day. Let's go to the police station.
All right, let's not be rude. Although it is Sherlock Holmes. He is kind of rude. So, yeah, if you remember, one of the policemen got one of his paper pouch stolen by a kid. And that's why we were trying to help that guy, was to get the papers back, so... Hey, guess what?
So, what news do you have, Mr. Holmes?
Well, I have your papers here.
So, what news do you have, Mr. Holmes?
Oh, do I have to get them for you? Here.
So, what news do you have, Mr. Holmes?
Oh, wait a minute. Didn't I get them? Police bag. I have the police bag. Okay, select them and hand them to
Are
me.
you sure it's the police bag that you lost?
Yes, but someone attempted to force it open. They didn't succeed, but now the lock is stuck. Perhaps you could...
Let's see.
Oh, God. You can't open your own bag? Oh, it's a puzzle. And do we have any idea what the combination could be? Oh, boy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so let's see. 1. Now, and they've got arrows pointing. Oh boy. Let's reset it and see if this guy's got any clues for us. Oh, I can't get out of it? Can I get out of it? Close. Have you got any clues for me?
So, what news do you have, Mr. Holmes?
No clues. All right, let's reset it and start again. I'm thinking it needs to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but in what order? So the question is, okay, there's the 6. That can't be right. One. There's 3. There's 6 in the right position. Okay.
All done.
Ah, a big thank you, Mr. Holmes.
Think nothing of it, my friend.
All right. Well, there you go.
So, the reports.
Why don't you wait till the inspectors get back? You would certainly learn more.
If I wanted to meet the inspectors, I would have done so. So, give me the preliminary reports, and above all, do not mention my visit to anyone. Is that clear?
Sure, if that's what you want. Here are the reports.
Thank you.
What a snob. All right, preliminary reports on the death of Polly Nichols. Death of Polly Nichols, 31st August 1888. This is an autopsy report by Dr. Henry Llewellyn. Her throat had been cut from left to right, 2 distinct cuts being on the left side, the windpipe, gullet, and spinal cord being cut through. A bruise, apparently of a thumb, being on the right lower jaw, also one on the left cheek. The abdomen had been cut open from the center of the bottom of the ribs, then along right side, under the pelvis to the left of the stomach. There the wound was jagged. The omentum, or coating of the stomach, was also cut in several places, and 2 small stabs on private parts, apparently done with a strong bladed knife, supposed to have been done by some left-handed person, death being almost instantaneous. Well, the first one on Saturday 1st from the East Londoner Advertiser. Scarcely has the horror and sensation caused by the discovery of murdered woman in Whitechapel some short time ago had time to abate when another discovery is made which, for the brutality exercised on the victim, is even more shocking and will no doubt create as great a sensation in the vicinity as its predecessor. That seems to be quite the run-on sentence. Geez, take a breath. Okay, the affair up to the present is enveloped in complete mystery, and the police have as yet no evidence to trace the perpetrators of the horrible deed. The facts are that the constable John Neal was walking down Bucks Row, Thomas Street, Whitechapel, about 3:45 on Friday morning, when he discovered a woman between 35 and 40 of age lying at the side of the street with her throat cut right open from ear to ear. The instrument with which the deed was done, traversing the throat from left to right, the wound was about 2 inches wide, and blood was flowing profusely. She was discovered to be lying in a pool of blood. She was immediately conveyed to the Whitechapel mortuary, when it was found that besides the wound in the throat, the lower part of the abdomen was completely ripped open, with bowels protruding. The wound extends nearly to her breast and must have been effected with a large knife. As the corpse lies in the mortuary, it presents a ghastly sight. The victim seems to be between 35 and 40 years of age and measures 5 feet 2 inches in height. The hands are bruised and bear evidence of having engaged in a severe struggle. There is the impression of a ring having been worn on one of the deceased fingers, but there is nothing to show that it had been wrenched from her in a struggle. Some of the front teeth have also been knocked out. The face is bruised on both cheeks and very much discolored. Deceased wore a rough brown ulster with large buttons in front. Her clothes are torn and cut up in several places, bearing evidence of the ferocity of which the murder was committed. The only way by which this police can prosecute an inquiry at present is by finding someone who can identify the deceased, and then, if possible, trace those in whose company she was last seen. In Buck's Row, naturally, the greatest excitement prevails, and several persons in the neighborhood state that an affray occurred shortly after midnight, but no screams were heard, nor anything beyond what might have been considered evidence of an ordinary brawl. In any case, the police unfortunately will have great difficulty in bringing in to justice the murderer or murderers. All right, and then there also, I guess, was a great fire at the London warehouse, probably the same time. A fire broke out shortly before 9 o'clock on Thursday night in one of the huge warehouses of the London warehouses. The warehouses were closed, as usual, at 4 in the afternoon, and there are then a few persons except the night policemen and firemen left on the premises. At about 8:30, the smell of fire was noticed, and shortly afterwards there was an immense burst of flames from the top of one of the vast buildings right in the center of the warehouses. The volume of the fire was terrific, but at 9 o'clock the authorities of the fire brigade had heard nothing of the occurrence. Shortly afterwards an alarm was given at the Whitechapel station, and the officials of the brigade instantly ordered every steamer to proceed to the scene, and the circulation of the news amongst the other stations caused steamers to be sent out from every district in London. On arrival of the engines, it was found that a fire of enormous strength was raging in the upper floors of a great building, about 150 yards long and half as broad. The flames could not have been broken out in a more dangerous part of the warehouses than the site of this fire. The South Quay warehouses. They were crammed with colonial produce in the upper floors and brandy and gin in the lower floors. Through the great iron-barred windows, the fire could be seen raging like a furnace, and the enormous tongues of bluish and yellowish flames, which constantly burnt up with great roars, pointed to the fact that spirits were aiding the progress of the flames. The scene at 10:30 was an imposing one. In the enormous warehouses, crammed with goods of incalculable value, there, with vast buildings on every side, and with great vessels in the wet warehouses, firemen, policemen, and dock officers were either watching or aiding in endeavoring to extinguish the fire, while an enormous crowd gathered round the great gates and gazed at the progress of the fire from a distance. And this article is from the Star, again, September 1st, 1888. The women lured to by streets to be butchered. The latest victim identified. Opening of the inquest and great local excitement. The victim of the latest Whitechapel horror, the woman who was found yesterday morning in Buck's Row, completely disemboweled and with her head nearly gashed from her body, was for a time completely unknown. As the news of the murder spread, however, first one woman and then another came forward to view the body, and at length it was found that a woman answering the description of the murdered woman had lodged in a common lodging house, 18 Thrall Street, Spitalfields. Women from that place were fetched, and they identified the deceased as Polly, who had shared a room with 3 other women in the place. On the usual terms of such houses, nightly payment of $4 each, well, 4D, whatever that is, each woman having a separate bed. It was gathered that the deceased had led the life of an unfortunate while lodging in the house, which was only for about 3 weeks past. Nothing more was known of her by them, but that when she presented herself for her lodging on Thursday night, she was turned away by the deputy because she had not the money. She was then the worse for drink, but not drunk, and turned away laughing, saying, "I'll soon get my doff's money. See what a jolly bonnet I've got now." She was wearing a bonnet which she had not been seen with before, and left the lodging-house door. A woman of the neighborhood saw her later. She told the police even as late as 2:30 on Friday morning in Whitechapel Road. Opposite the church and at the corner of Osborne Street and at a 3:45, she was found within 500 yards of the spot murdered. The people of the lodging house knew her as Polly, but at 7:30 last evening, a woman named Mary Ann Monk, at present an inmate of Lambeth Workhouse, was taken to the mortuary and identified the body as that of Mary Ann Nichols, also called Polly. She knew her, she said, and they were inmates of the Lambeth Workhouse, together in April and May last, the deceased having been passed there from another workhouse. On the 12th of May, according to Monk, Nichols left the workhouse to take a situation as servant at Ingleside, Wandsworth Common. It afterwards became known that Nichols betrayed her trust as a domestic servant by stealing £3 from her employer and absconding. From that time, she had been wandering about. Monk met her, she said, about 6 weeks ago, when herself out of the workhouse and drank with her. She was sure the deceased was Polly Nichols, and having twice viewed the features as the body lay in a shell, maintained her opinion. There is a terrible significant similarity between this ghastly crime and the two mysterious murders of women which have occurred in the same district within the last 3 months. In each case, the victim has been a woman of abandoned character. Each crime has been committed in the dark hours of the morning, and more important still, as pointing to one man, and that man, a maniac, being the culprit. Each murder has been accompanied by hideous mutilation. In the second case, that of woman Martha Turner, it will be remembered that no fewer than 30 stabs were inflicted. The scene of this murder was George Yard, a place appropriately known locally as the slaughterhouse. As in both other cases, there was in this not the slightest clue to the murderer. No one was known to have any motive for causing the woman's death. She is parted from her husband and had lived with a man named Turner, but the searching coroner's inquiry revealed nothing connecting either with the crimes. Fancied that some of her many wounds had been caused by a bayonet, and she was said to have been seen with a soldier shortly before her death. Some soldiers were paraded at the tower, and one was said to have been identified by a policeman as having been waiting about George Yard just about the time of the murder. But nothing came of that. The first murder, which strangely enough did not rouse much interest, was committed in Osborne Street. The woman in that case was alive when discovered, but unconscious, and she died in the hospital without recovering. Consequently, she was unable to whisper a word to put the police on the right track of her fiendish assailant, and her murder has remained a mystery. All 3 crimes have been committed within a very small radius. Each of the ill-lighted thoroughfares to which the women were decoyed to be foully butchered are off turnings from Whitechapel Road, and all are within a half-mile. The fact that these 3 tragedies have been committed within such a limited area and are so strangely alike in their details is forcing on all minds the conviction that they are the work of some cool, cunning man with a mania for murder. There was no new light thrown on the case this morning. At 9 o'clock, the body of deceased was removed from the mortuary to an improvised operating room on the premises, and Dr. Ralph Llewellyn made a post-mortem examination. The object of the examination was to determine, if possible, the order in which the various cuts were made. It is evident from the cuts in the throat that the head was bent back by the murderer before the knife was used. Whether the other mutilation took place before or after death remains to be settled, as also the position in which the woman lay when the deed was done. There are several questions of this kind which may throw light in the case, notably the small quantity of blood at the place where she was found, and the fact that there must have been much of it somewhere else. At present, clues to the murder are entirely lacking, and the location of the place where the deed was done was the first point necessary to establish. All right, so that was quite a bit of information.
Have you obtained the preliminary reports?
Yes, we'll read them on the go. Let's to the scene of the crime at Bucks Row, Watson.
Okay, there's the clinic that we were at. And we're on Whitechapel Street. That's good. So it's got to be down one of these side streets.
I have no reason to go that way.
All right. Yeah. Let's try this way.
But what are all these people doing here, Holmes?
Apparently, they came to see the scene of the crime.
What about us? Aren't we going to see it?
We will return this evening, Watson. The circumstances shall be ideal for carrying out our little experiments. Well, Watson, we are at the scene of the Polly Nichols
Bucks
murder.
Row.
Imagine the victim lying at the spot where she was found and try to discern all of the clues we can. Watson, you are a writer. I am therefore entrusting you with our deduction board. It will help us to establish certain facts.
Understood, Holmes.
A deduction board. Okay. All right, so there's where the body was laying. Let's see what we can find out. What is this down here? That closes it. Let's start at the bottom here and take a look as we come up the body.
Let's look at this poor woman more closely.
Okay, so let's grab our glass here and let's look at the throat.
The throat was slit from left to right. There are 2 incisions.
Okay. Oh, that looks weird.
The tongue is swollen.
Okay, why would the tongue be swollen?
The tongue is swollen.
Yeah, I know. Let's look at the blood.
A small pool of blood, 6 inches in diameter.
Okay. Oh, we read the documents. The document said something about bruises on the jaw and on the skin up here.
There's a bruise on the left cheek.
Okay, and another bruise.
There's a bruise at the level of the right maxilla.
Okay. Yeah, and when that turns up red, that means we got something good. All right, I think that's it. I don't think there's anything else. Okay. Did we look at the wall?
No signs of blood.
No signs of blood. Okay, we looked at the bonnet.
There is a black bonnet near the left hand.
Okay, and then let's look at this wound in her stomach.
The body was still warm. Let's reread the preliminary report for the details on the wounds inflicted upon this poor woman.
Body's still warm? Well, I don't know if there's anything else to see in the preliminary report. Let's start putting some of these things. We got the bonnet already. Pool of blood. Where does that go? No traces of blood on the wall. The victim had her throat slit. We knew that. Okay, black bonnet. No traces of blood. The victim had her throat slit. Okay, so that gives us the wall was washed. The killer slit the victim's throat quietly. The victim didn't have her throat slit while standing. I don't know. We haven't established that yet. No traces of blood on the wall. Maybe there would have been traces of blood on the wall if we stabbed her standing up, because there would have been blood. But if she was laying down, the blood would be where it is on the ground. So, the victim didn't have her throat slit standing up. Let's try that one. And then a pool of blood. The blood spurted. The blood didn't flow in strong spurts. The murderer wanted to drain the victim. I don't know that. It didn't it didn't spurt. Okay. All right, so there must be other clues. Let's keep looking.
No marks on the ground. The ground is muddy.
Ground is muddy.
No marks on the ground. The ground is muddy.
Okay. Anything else in the area? Oh, look, there's people. Oh, they've got a mark on them. And there's one over there. What's this?
There is only one streetlight lit on this street, Watson, and this spot is particularly poorly lit.
Okay. And what about this?
This spot is deserted, Holmes. The prostitutes only come here to exercise.
Well, Watson,
Exercise?
we have found all of the possible clues, I think. We will now attempt to recreate the scene of the murder. Come closer, Watson. I have to make you up.
Make him up?
You are joking, Holmes?
What's he? He's putting makeup on him? Oh my gosh.
I feel ridiculous, Holmes.
You look like her. Are you dead?
Now, Watson, come and stand here in front of me. You shall play the role of the poor woman, and I shall play that of the murderer. Let's try to reconstruct the facts to ensure the final result corresponds indisputably to the way that Polly Nichols was killed.
Okay. So we're going to reenact the crime. And why is he on the ground? Wait a minute now. Why is he on the ground? Because didn't we establish that he didn't cut the... he cut the throat on the ground. Okay, so lying down with a knife in the right hand, neck or stomach, Jack's position, all right? And then we play the scene.
I hope that, as with the real murder, nobody had to witness all of that, Watson. If the murderer used his right hand astride his victim, there wasn't much room.
Okay, so no right hand. So let's switch to the left hand.
The murderer had enough room to inflict the wounds to the neck, and these wounds suggest the left hand was used.
Okay, so that gave us something. So that was that wound. Let's see. But what about the bruises? How did he get her on the ground? Let's do a stand-up thing. And it was established that there wasn't any blood on the wall, which meant that he didn't use a knife. He's left-handed. Throat, and let's try this.
This position is unlikely.
Why? The hands? Is it the hands? Let's switch hands. So we're going to use the right hand.
Yes, it's quite possible the events occurred like this.
Okay.
My dear Watson, now that we have found all of our clues, nothing remains but to subject them to our most likely hypotheses in order to deduce the facts.
Okay. Poorly lit light. Let's see where that goes. Dirty and damp ground. Okay, I went down here. Prostitute only down this street to exercise. Okay. That opened up a new window, 2 new windows. So we're looking at a black bonnet, poorly lit, prostitute only does exercise. The victim was holding her bonnet in her hand at the time of the murder. This bonnet was already on the ground. That's not true. The victim was cold. How do we know that? So that one right there. And then the victim was asking for alms. The victim wasn't afraid. The victim collected the bonnet from the ground. Okay, we were told that she had the bonnet when she left the place, that she didn't have enough money to spend the night. The victim was asking for alms. No, she was there to exercise. So it must be this one. The victim wasn't afraid. Okay, and that leaves P. Nichols wasn't cautious. Nichols didn't have a bonnet. She did have a bonnet. Nichols had her bonnet in her hand and was ready to exercise. Yes, that's it. And it's green, so that's good. Okay, so from here, no traces of blood. Victim had her throat slit. Those are true statements. A little pool of blood and dry and damp ground. Now this is different, so let's check this one here. Victim didn't have her throat slit while standing. That's true. The blood didn't flow in strong spurts, so let's see what this one does. He could not have had relations on the ground. The murderer threw water on the ground. There were relations on the ground. I don't know. She wasn't killed here. Nichols was dead before being stretched out and having her throat slit. Nichols was killed by having her throat slit. Okay, that's not right. Dead before she stretched out. Nichols wasn't killed here. No, none of those. None of those work. Okay, this blood didn't flow in strong spurts. There were relations on the ground. This one must be wrong. He threw water on the ground? No. Dry and damp, dirty and damp ground. Okay, none of those are right. So it must be coming. It must be coming from here. The blood spurted. The blood didn't flow in strong spurts. The murderer wanted to drain the victim. We don't know that. Oh, she was dead before being stretched out. So he must have choked her, and that's why her tongue was so thick. Okay. That's that one. This is 2. Okay, no footsteps on the ground. Tongue was bloated. Throat was slit from left to right. Victim has a bruise on the right jaw. Murderer must have been sitting on the victim. Corpse was still warm. And okay, now let's see what we have. Okay, so we've only got one result here. Corpse was still warm. No footsteps on the ground. The murderer cut open Polly Nichols' throat. The victim was dumped. The murderer warmed the victim up. The victim wasn't dragged. Okay, I think it's that one. Murder took place in the daytime. We know that's not true. Nichols' murder took place on the premises. Okay, that's green. That's correct. Okay. Okay, the murder beat the victim. Not really. The bruise was caused by hard pressure with fingers. I think it's that one. The killer's right hand prevented the victim from screaming. There were relations while standing up. They didn't have exercise, so the killer's left hand prevented it. So it's either this one or that one. I'm thinking the left hand caused her not to scream. And he strangled her with the right hand. Okay, what's this one? Tongue was bloated. Slit from left to right. Nichols was stranded. Nichols was poisoned. It was suffocated. I say strangled. Yes. And then Nichols' killer is left-handed. Well, okay. Nichols' killer had 2 knives. Right-handed or left-handed? Well, we don't really know. Okay, yes, we don't know left or right-handed, for sure. Killer's a big man, a strong man. I'd say he's a strong man.
The victim was most probably dead before being laid down. Once the heart stopped, gravity drained the body slowly, not in a heavy spurt that would have stained half the street.
Thank you, Holmes. I understand why you told me not to change clothes. Do you realize that our behavior didn't alarm anyone?
The victim's ordeal was even more discreet. By acting in silence, we have confirmed something. The crime definitely took place here. The victim and her murderer were able to come here without making any noise, and afterwards the murder took place without the slightest cry being uttered. Come, Watson, let's go home. We have spent far too long in this sinister alley. And so, my dear Watson, the day and night which we passed in Whitechapel were enlightening, weren't they?
An adventure that I most certainly will never relate. To be in the skin of that poor woman. I prefer not to speak of it further. But have we really learned anything about the murderer? Obviously a man, given the necessary strength.
We have little to go on, at least no more than the police. But in my opinion, Inspector Aberline has a trick or two up his sleeve. No, I want to talk about the facts and what we can draw from them. We know where the crime was committed and under what conditions. I would like to ask you about the possible motives for the crime. According to you, Watson, what could have pushed the murderer to act in such a way?
Okay, so we have to decide what we think the possible motives are, but I think I'm going to rest here, and we'll figure this out in the next episode. I hope to see you there. Ta-ta for now.